The honeysuckle heavy on the evening air, the distant twang of a banjo from the festival stage, the low murmur of voices punctuated by laughter. These were the sounds of Harmony Creek settling into its comfortable rhythm. My rhythm. My life, here in this small corner of the American South, felt as predictable and sweet as the iced tea I sipped on the courthouse lawn. I was Eleanor Vance, wife of Thomas Vance, owner of the Book Nook on Main Street, and for 10 years my world had been a tapestry woven with threads of quiet contentment and absolute certainty. Thomas was across the lawn, talking to Mayor Thompson, his easy smile and confident posture the very picture of a respected local businessman. He was handsome, in that classic, unassuming southern way, kind eyes, a strong jawline, hair just starting to silver at the temples. We'd been married for 7 years, together for 10. Our life wasn't one for grand gestures or dramatic pronouncements. It was built on shared routines, quiet evenings, mutual respect, and a deep, abiding trust. Or so I believed. I was chatting with Mrs. Gable, her formidable presence a fixture of every town gathering. Mrs. Gable, bless her heart, saw and knew everything that happened in Harmony Creek, or at least she collected enough snippets of information to piece together her own version of reality, which she then disseminated with practiced, subtle nudges. "Lovely evening, isn't it, Eleanor?" she purred, fanning herself slowly. "Reminds me of the old days, before things changed." I smiled politely. "It is beautiful, Mrs. Gable. The festival always is." "Yes, the festival," she sighed, her gaze drifting across the lawn, past Thomas, towards the edge of the crowd. "So many memories. Thomas was quite the young man back then, full of energy. Remember that summer? Oh, must be 10 years ago now. Just before he got serious and proposed to you. He was quite taken with Seraphina Dubois, wasn't he? Before she up and left town." My smile felt suddenly brittle. 10 years ago? Thomas and I had started dating 10 years ago, almost to the day. He'd proposed 9 years ago. There was no before he got serious with me. We were serious. That summer, we'd spent almost every evening together, building our future on late-night conversations and shared dreams. Seraphina Dubois? I repeated, the name unfamiliar. It sounded exotic, out of place in Harmony Creek. I don't think I ever met her." "Oh, no, dear, you wouldn't have," Mrs. Gable said, her eyes twinkling with that peculiar mix of feigned innocence and sharp knowing. "She was only here for a few months that spring and summer, visiting her aunt who used to live out on Miller's Ridge. Quite the looker she was. Caused a bit of a stir. Thomas was quite smitten." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Just a silly little fling, of course. Before he settled down with our lovely Eleanor. A silly little fling. Before he settled down with me. The timeline felt wrong. It gnawed at me, a tiny, sharp pebble in the smooth shoe of my comfortable life. I knew Thomas. I knew our story. There wasn't a gap, a pause, a before. We were together. I excused myself from Mrs. Gable, her knowing smile following me. I needed air. The sweet honeysuckle suddenly felt cloying, suffocating. I found a quiet bench under an oak tree, the rough bark a grounding presence against my back. 10 years ago, summer. A fling with Seraphina Dubois. Before he got serious with me. My mind replayed our early days, the awkward first date at the diner, the nervous first kiss by the creek, the effortless way we fell into step together. There was no mention of anyone else, no hint of a recent intense connection that predated me. Was Mrs. Gable mistaken? She was prone to embellishment, certainly, but her core facts were usually rooted in some truth, twisted though it might be. I looked at Thomas again. He was laughing now, easy and relaxed. Could he have had a fling with someone else while he was with me? The thought felt alien, impossible. Thomas, my steady, reliable Thomas. But the pebble was still there, rubbing, irritating. A fling. The word itself felt cheap, transactional. And the timing. The timing was all wrong. I stayed under the oak tree for a long time, the sounds of the festival a distant hum. When Thomas finally found me, the sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges. "Eleanor, there you are. I was looking for you," he said, his voice warm with concern. "Everything all right?" I forced a smile. "Just needed a moment. It's a bit overwhelming tonight." He sat beside me, putting an arm around my shoulders. His touch, usually comforting, felt foreign, distant. "Rough day at the bookstore?" he asked kindly. "No, not really." I hesitated. How to ask? How to bring up a name I'd just heard, a timeline that contradicted everything I believed. Thomas, I started, my voice low. Did you ever know someone named Serafina Dubois? His body stiffened almost imperceptibly. The easy warmth drained from his face, replaced by a guarded expression I'd never seen before. He removed his arm. Serafina Dubois? He repeated, his voice flat. Where did you hear that name? The shift in his demeanour was all the answer I needed. My stomach plummeted. Mrs. Gable hadn't been mistaken about the name. Mrs. Gable mentioned her, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Said she was visiting here about 10 years ago. Said you had a fling with her. He was silent for a moment, looking out at the darkening lawn. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. That was a long time ago, Eleanor. Before we were married. Before we were married? I echoed, my voice rising slightly despite myself. Thomas, we started dating 10 years ago, that summer. Mrs. Gable said it was just before you got serious with me. Was she wrong about the timing? He finally looked at me, his eyes troubled. It was complicated, Eleanor. It was a brief thing. It didn't mean anything. It happened, early on, before things were really defined between us. Early on? My voice was barely a whisper now. Thomas, we were together. We were exclusive. We were building a life. We were figuring things out, he countered, a defensive edge creeping into his tone. It was a mistake, a stupid, meaningless mistake. It ended quickly, and then we got married, and that was that. It's in the past, Eleanor. It doesn't matter now. It doesn't matter now. The words hit me like a physical blow. It didn't matter? The fact that he had been with someone else, lied about it for 10 years, and dismissed it as a meaningless mistake that somehow didn't count because it was before they were married, even though we were together? It doesn't matter, I repeated, the quiet rage starting to simmer beneath the surface. You lied to me, Thomas, for 10 years, and you think it doesn't matter? I didn't lie, he said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I just didn't tell you. It was over. It was insignificant. Bringing it up would have only caused pain. I wanted to protect you. Protect me? I scoffed, the sound foreign to my own ears. By letting me build my entire life, my entire marriage on a lie of omission, by letting me believe our beginning was something it wasn't. It was one mistake, he insisted, his voice rising. Years ago. It has nothing to do with our marriage, with the life we've built since then. His words echoed Mrs. Gable's before he settled down with our lovely Eleanor. It was the same narrative, the same minimizing, the same drawing of a line at the wedding date that somehow invalidated everything that came before. But what came before was us. Everything that happened before we got married counts, Thomas, I said, standing up abruptly. My legs felt unsteady, especially when it involves you being with someone else while you were supposed to be with me. Eleanor, please, he said. Reaching for my arm, I pulled away. I can't. Not right now. The sweet air of Harmony Creek, the festive lights, the distant banjo, it all felt like a cruel mockery. The harmony was gone. My creek had overflowed its banks. I walked away, leaving him sitting alone on the bench under the oak tree. I walked past the laughing crowds, past the stalls selling lemonade and crafts, past the knowing glances of people like Mrs. Gable, who suddenly seemed to be everywhere. I walked towards the quiet sanctuary of my bookstore. The bell above the door jingled softly as I entered. The air inside was cool and smelled of old paper and quiet stories. It was my refuge, a place where the world made sense, bound neatly between covers. But tonight, even here, the chaos followed me. I locked the door and sank into my worn armchair behind the counter. The books on the shelves seemed to watch me, silent witnesses to the unravelling of my carefully constructed reality, a silly little fling. Before he settled down with our lovely Eleanor, the words circled in my mind, a venomous carousel, 10 years. 10 years of believing I knew our history, our foundation. And all this time there was a hidden chapter, a secret character, Serafina Dubois. And she was back. I hadn't seen her, not knowingly, but Mrs. Gable's comment implied her return. Her presence, combined with the revelation, felt like a physical threat to the fragile peace of my life. I spent the rest of the evening in a daze, surrounded by the silent comfort of books that offered no answers to my particular dilemma. When I finally drove home, the house felt cold and unfamiliar. Thomas was sitting on the couch, the living room dark, except for the glow of the streetlights filtering through the windows. He looked tired, his face etched with something that might have been regret, or maybe just frustration. I didn't turn on the lights. I just stood there, in the doorway, the silence heavy between us. "Eleanor," he said finally, his voice soft, "can we talk? What is there to talk about, Thomas?" My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I felt hollowed out. "You had an affair. You lied about it for 10 years, and you think it doesn't matter." "It wasn't an affair," he said, his voice firm. "It was a brief lapse in judgment. It ended. We moved on." "We moved on because I didn't know," I corrected him, my voice gaining a little strength, fueled by a cold anger. "You moved on. I was living a life based on incomplete information, on a lie." "It was a mistake, Eleanor. A mistake," he repeated, standing up. "Everyone makes mistakes. It happened years ago. It has no bearing on our marriage." "It has every bearing on our marriage," I countered, stepping further into the room. "Our marriage is built on our history, Thomas, on the trust we built. How can I trust you now when you kept something like this from me for a decade? How can I look back at our past and know what's real and what's a lie?" "Our marriage is real," he insisted, his frustration evident. "What we have now is real. That was just a blip, a stupid, regrettable blip." "A blip?" I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Is that what you call it, a blip? While you were having your blip, I was falling in love with you, building my hopes on you, thinking I knew who you were." "You do know who I am," he pleaded. "I'm the man who loves you, who chose you, who married you. That's who I am. And you're also the man who cheated on me and hid it for 10 years. I shot back, the words sharp as broken glass. "Which one is the truth, Thomas? Or are they both true?" He flinched, as if I had struck him. "Eleanor, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you. I was a coward. I was afraid of losing you. And now," I asked, my voice trembling, "are you still afraid of losing me?" He stepped towards me, reaching out his hand. "More than anything. Eleanor, I love you. That was a mistake I regret every single day, even before you knew. It taught me how much you mean to me." "Did it?" I asked, not taking his hand. "Or did you just get away with it for 10 years and hoped I'd never find out?" "No." His voice was earnest now, stripped of the earlier defensiveness. "No, I hated myself for it. But the longer it went on, the harder it was to tell you. I was trapped by my own silence." I wanted to believe him. A part of me, the part that still loved him fiercely, yearned to believe him. To accept his apology, to dismiss it as a youthful mistake made before our bond was truly solidified, as he seemed to believe. But the other part, the part that felt violated and lied to, couldn't. The 10 years of silence felt heavier than the act itself. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the calculated decision to conceal it, to let me live in ignorance. I can't do this right now, Thomas," I said, backing away slowly. "I can't even look at you without feeling like I don't know you at all." I turned and walked towards the guest room, the room we used for visitors but which had remained empty for months. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Thomas call my name, a desperate, raw sound that tore at my heart. But I didn't open the door. The guest room felt sterile, impersonal. I lay on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the house amplifying the turmoil in my mind. A silly little fling. Serafina Dubois, 10 years. A lie. The pebble had become a stone, heavy and sharp in my chest. Harmony Creek, my peaceful haven, suddenly felt like a stage, and I was trapped in a play I didn't know the script to, with a past I didn't recognize. The next few days were a blur of strained silence and tentative, painful conversations. Thomas tried to apologize, to explain again how meaningless it was, how much he loved me now. But every time he minimized the past, it felt like a fresh wound. He couldn't seem to grasp that the issue wasn't just the act, but the decade of deception. "Don't you understand, Thomas?" I said one morning, our voices low and tense over untouched breakfast plates. "It's not just that it happened, it's that you let me believe something false for 10 years. Every memory of our early relationship feels tainted now. Was that kiss real? Was that promise real? Or were you thinking of her?" "Eleanor, stop it," he said, his voice tight. "That's not fair. I loved you then and I love you now. What happened with Serafina was a mistake. It was fleeting. It was over. But you hid it, I insisted. You actively chose to keep it a secret for 10 years. What else are you capable of hiding?" "Nothing," he said, slamming his hand on the table, making the plates jump. There is nothing else. That was it. It was stupid. I regret it. I should have told you years ago, but I didn't. And now I'm paying for it, aren't I? His tone, shifting from remorse to self-pity, infuriated me. Paying for it? I repeated, standing up. You think this is about you paying for it? This is about my entire world being turned upside down. My trust in you being shattered. You don't get to decide when the consequences are over, Thomas. I walked out, needing space, needing air that didn't feel thick with his justifications and my pain. I drove to my bookstore, unlocking the door and burying myself in the familiar comfort of the shelves. David found me there later that afternoon. David Miller, my best friend since college, a quiet, steady presence in my life. He owned the small hardware store down the street, and his visits to the book nook were a regular, cherished part of my week. He took one look at my face and didn't ask what was wrong. He just pulled up a chair, accepted the cup of tea I wordlessly offered, and waited. Finally, the words spilled out of me, a torrent of hurt and confusion. I told him about Mrs. Gable, about Serafina Dubois, about the 10-year-old secret and Thomas's reaction. David listened patiently, his expression grim. When I finished, the silence stretched, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. "Eleanor," he said finally, his voice gentle but firm. That's a lot to process." "A lot," I laughed weakly. "It's everything, David. It's my whole past with him, rewritten. It's 10 years of lies. He says it was just a fling, didn't mean anything," David said, repeating Thomas's words, but without the minimizing tone. "That's what he says," I replied bitterly. "But how can I know? And even if it was meaningless, the lie wasn't. The hiding wasn't. The letting me believe something false for 10 years wasn't meaningless." "No," David agreed quietly. "That's the real betrayal, isn't it? The years of silence." "Yes." I felt a surge of relief that someone understood. "He keeps talking about the affair as a mistake, but the lie was a choice. Every single day for 10 years, he chose not to tell me." "What are you going to do?" David asked, his eyes full of concern. "I don't know," I admitted, feeling utterly lost. "A part of me loves him so much. The Thomas I thought I knew, the life we built feels real. But the other part, the part that feels like a fool, like I was living in a fantasy." I trailed off, unable to articulate the depth of the fracture. "You need time, Eleanor," David said. "Time to think, time to feel, and maybe some space." Space. The word hung in the air. Leaving Thomas, leaving our home. It felt terrifying, like stepping off a cliff, but staying felt suffocating, like being buried alive under the weight of his secret. "I can't stay in the house right now," I confessed. "It feels wrong, tainted." "My couch is always available," David offered immediately. "No questions asked, just a place to breathe." His offer was a lifeline, a temporary escape from the suffocating atmosphere of our home. "Thank you, David," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Maybe just for a little while." The next morning, before Thomas woke up, I packed a small bag. I left a note on the kitchen counter. It was short, simple. "I need space. I'm staying at David's for a few days. We need time to think." I drove the few blocks to David's small, neat house. It was blessedly quiet. David was already at his hardware store, but he'd left a key under the mat and a note telling me to make myself at home. Being away from Thomas was strange. The silence in David's house was different from the strained silence in my own. This was a neutral silence, a space where I could finally hear my own thoughts without the noise of his justifications or my own internal arguments. I spent the days walking, sitting by the creek, rereading old books, trying to find solid ground in a world that suddenly felt fluid and unstable. The small town felt different now. Every familiar face seemed to hold a hidden knowledge. Every whispered conversation felt like it was about me. Mrs. Gable's face, with its knowing smile, haunted my thoughts. Serafina Dubois, the name itself was a ghost, a tangible link to the past that refused to stay buried. And Serafina was back in town. I hadn't seen her yet, but the gossip confirmed it. Her return felt like a deliberate act of cruelty, the past walking right back into my present. One afternoon I was walking past the town square when I saw her, standing near the fountain, talking to someone I didn't recognize. Serafina Dubois. She was, as Mrs. Gable had said, quite striking. Dark, wavy hair, confident posture, dressed in a way that was just slightly more fashionable, more worldly than the typical Harmony Creek attire. She laughed, a bright, clear sound that carried across the square. I stopped dead in my tracks, hidden partially behind a large oak tree. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the woman who was a secret in my history, the woman who represented the lie. As if sensing my gaze, she turned her head. Her eyes, a vivid green, met mine across the lawn. A small, knowing smile played on her lips. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a smile that said, "I know something you didn't, and I know you know now." A chill went down my spine despite the warm southern air. It felt intentional. Her presence, her look, felt like a deliberate act of provocation. She wasn't just a ghost from the past. She was a living, breathing reminder, seemingly enjoying the drama she represented. I couldn't hold her gaze. I turned and hurried away, my face hot, my hands trembling. The humiliation was a bitter taste in my mouth. It wasn't just the betrayal anymore. It was the public nature of it, the feeling that my deepest vulnerability was now fodder for the town's gossip mill, embodied by this woman who looked like she didn't have a care in the world. That night, back at David's, I finally broke down. I wasn't just sad or angry anymore. I was deeply, profoundly hurt. Hurt by Thomas, hurt by the lie, hurt by Seraphina's casual cruelty, hurt by the feeling that my life had been built on a foundation of sand. David sat with me, just holding my hand, letting me cry until there were no tears left. "I don't know if I can fix this, David," I whispered, my voice raw. "I don't know if I even want to. How do you rebuild when the ground beneath you feels like it's crumbled?" "You take it one step at a time, Eleanor," he said softly, "and you decide what you need. Not what Thomas needs, not what the town expects. What do you need to feel whole again?" What did I need? I needed the past to be different. I needed the lie to have never existed. I needed to trust Thomas again. And I didn't know if any of that was possible. Thomas called and texted constantly. I replied sparingly, telling him I was safe but still needed time. His messages were a mix of apologies, reassurances of his love, and increasing frustration. "When are you coming home, Eleanor? We can't fix this if you're not here." But being here, in Harmony Creek, felt like being under a microscope. Every trip to the grocery store, every walk down Main Street felt like running a gauntlet of curious eyes and hushed whispers. The town, once my comfort, now felt like an accomplice to the secret, a silent judge of my pain. One evening, Thomas showed up at David's. David answered the door, his expression polite but firm. "She needs space, Thomas," David said, standing in the doorway. "I know, but I need to talk to her," Thomas pleaded, looking past David into the house. "Eleanor, please." I came to the doorway, standing behind David. Seeing Thomas standing there, looking lost and desperate, twisted something inside me. The love was still there, a stubborn, aching presence, but it was tangled with pain and doubt. "I'm not ready, Thomas," I said, my voice quiet. "Not ready for what? To talk? To try and work this out?" he asked, his voice rising. "Eleanor, we can't just pretend this didn't happen. We have to face it." "You should have faced it 10 years ago," I retorted, the words sharp. He flinched. I know I messed up, but running away isn't the answer." "I'm not running away," I said, straightening my shoulders. "I'm taking a step back so I don't drown." David gently put a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "Give her time, Thomas. This is hard for both of you." Thomas looked from David to me, his face a mask of frustration and pain. "Fine," he said, his voice tight. "But we can't stay like this forever, Eleanor." He turned and walked back to his car, the sound of the engine starting echoing in the quiet street. After he left, I sank onto the couch, exhausted. "He's hurting too, Eleanor," David said softly. "I know," I replied, "but his hurt doesn't erase mine, and his hurt is a consequence of his actions. Mine is a consequence of his lies." We talked for a long time that night. David didn't offer solutions, just listened and occasionally asked probing questions that forced me to articulate my feelings. He helped me see that Thomas's initial reaction, minimizing the affair, calling me childish for being upset, was as damaging as the affair itself. It showed a fundamental lack of understanding of the gravity of the betrayal and the impact of the deception. "He needs to understand that it's not just about the mistake of the affair," I said, trying to put my tangled thoughts into words. "It's about the choice to lie, and the impact that lie had on my perception of our entire relationship. He needs to show me that he understands that, not just that he's sorry I found out, or sorry I'm upset." The conversation with David clarified things. I wasn't just angry. I was grieving the loss of the past I thought I had. I was grieving the loss of my unquestioning trust in Thomas. I decided I needed to talk to Thomas again, but on my terms. Not in the heat of the moment, and not with him expecting me to just get over it. I called him the next day. "Thomas," I said, my voice calm, "I'll come home tomorrow. We need to talk. But I need you to understand something. This isn't about me just getting over a mistake. This is about rebuilding trust after a decade of deception. It's going to be hard, and it's going to take time, and I need you to be truly honest about everything and to listen to how this has affected me without getting defensive." There was a pause on the other end. "Okay, Eleanor," he said finally, his voice hesitant. "Okay, I understand. I'll be here." Coming home felt surreal. The house looked the same, smelled the same, but it felt different, haunted by the unspoken past. We sat in the living room, the same room where he had dismissed the affair days earlier. The air was thick with tension. "Okay, Eleanor," Thomas said, taking a deep breath. "You said you needed me to be honest. Ask me anything." I had spent the last few days compiling a mental list, questions I needed answered to even begin to process this. "When did it happen?" I asked, my voice low. "Exactly when? How long did it last?" He didn't hesitate this time. He gave me dates, a time frame. It was, as I suspected, about a year into our relationship. It lasted for about 2 months. Why? This was the hardest question. My voice trembled as I asked it. Why Serafina? Why then? Wasn't I enough? He looked at me, his eyes filled with pain. "Eleanor, it wasn't about you not being enough. You are everything to me. I can't explain it. We were working closely on something at the time. There was a connection, a physical attraction. It was stupid. I was young, I was foolish. It didn't mean I didn't love you. It didn't mean I wanted to be with her instead of you. It just happened, and then it ended." His explanation felt inadequate, frustratingly so, but his sincerity felt real. He wasn't minimizing it this time, not exactly. He was just admitting a failure he couldn't fully articulate. "How many times?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The details were painful, but I felt a desperate need to know the full extent of the lie. He answered honestly, providing a number that made my stomach clench. It wasn't a single incident, it was a series of choices over those 2 months. I closed my eyes, the images forming in my mind despite myself. It hurt more than I could have imagined. "And the lie?" I asked, opening my eyes again. "Why keep it a secret for 10 years? Why let me live a lie?" "Fear," he said immediately. "Pure fear. The first day after it ended, I wanted to tell you, but I was terrified you'd leave me, and the longer I waited, the harder it became. The secret grew, and I felt trapped by it. I thought if I just buried it, it would go away. And then, once we were married, I convinced myself that chapter was closed, that it didn't matter anymore because our marriage was a new beginning." He echoed his earlier sentiment, but this time, hearing him articulate it as a misguided belief rather than a justification, felt slightly different. It didn't excuse it, but it offered a glimpse into his flawed reasoning. "My parents always said," he continued, his voice low, "that marriage was sacred, like a fresh start, that whatever happened before, you left it behind. I guess I took that too literally. I thought the wedding ring somehow erased the past." This aligned with what the original story mentioned about the wife's religious upbringing. Thomas's family, particularly his mother Martha, were quite traditional and outwardly devout. It wasn't hard to imagine them instilling such a belief. "It doesn't erase the past, Thomas," I said, my voice firm, "especially when the past was a lie you kept from me." "I know that now," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "Seeing how much I've hurt you, seeing you leave, it's the worst pain I've ever felt. I was so focused on my own fear of losing you that I didn't think about your right to the truth. I was selfish. I was a coward." This was the first time he had acknowledged the impact on me with such clarity. It wasn't just an oops, I made a mistake. It was an understanding of the depth of the betrayal of trust. "And Serafina?" I asked, needing to address the present discomfort. "She's back in town. I saw her." His face tightened. "I know, I saw her too. It's awkward, uncomfortable." "Does she know I know?" I asked. I don't know," he admitted. "I haven't spoken to her, not really. Just a nod, a brief hello in the street. I don't want anything to do with her." You can't, I stated, the words coming out with quiet certainty. If we have any chance of getting through this, you can never have contact with her again. Not a nod, not a hello, nothing. He looked surprised for a moment, then nodded. Okay, yes, absolutely. I don't want contact with her either. I never want to think about that time again. And your family? I asked, my gaze steady. Do they know? He hesitated. They know, we're having problems. My mother thinks I'm being too hard on myself, and you're overreacting. My father, he just wants us to fix it and move on, for the sake of appearances. This confirmed my suspicions about his parents. Their concern was for the family name, the town's perception, not necessarily the emotional reality of our marriage. They don't understand, I said quietly. No, he agreed. They don't. We talked for hours, circling the same painful points, peeling back layers of hurt and misunderstanding. There were tears, mine mostly, and moments of raw honesty from both of us. Thomas admitted how scared he was, how much he regretted his actions, how he hadn't realized the depth of the scar his secret would leave. I don't know if I can forgive you, Thomas, I said late into the night, my voice heavy with exhaustion. Not right now. The lie. It's a heavy weight. I know, he said, his voice hoarse. I don't expect you to, but I'll do whatever it takes, Eleanor, whatever you need to try and earn your trust back, if that's even possible. I don't know if it is, I repeated honestly, but I'm willing to try, if you are. I am, he said immediately, his eyes earnest, more than anything. We decided on a path forward, tentative and uncertain. We would stay in the house, but I would need my own space, emotionally and sometimes physically. We would go to counselling, starting with a therapist David recommended in the next town over, away from the prying eyes of Harmony Creek. Thomas agreed to complete transparency, no secrets, no contact with Serafina, and most importantly, he agreed to listen to my pain without minimizing it, to understand that the healing process would be long and difficult. It wasn't a magical fix. The air between us was still fragile, thick with unspoken pain and lingering doubt. But for the first time since the Harmony Creek Summer Festival, I felt a tiny flicker of something other than despair, a flicker of possibility, a possibility that maybe, just maybe, the foundation could be rebuilt, not by ignoring the crack, but by painstakingly repairing it, piece by painful piece. The days that followed were a test of our resolve. Living together felt like walking on eggshells. Every glance, every touch, every moment of silence felt charged with the weight of the past. We started therapy. The first session was excruciating. Laying bare our deepest hurts and failures to a stranger felt both terrifying and necessary. I talked about the betrayal, the years of feeling like my reality was a lie, the humiliation of the town gossip. Thomas talked about his fear, his regret, his misguided belief that silence was protection. The therapist was skilled. She didn't take sides, but she validated my pain and challenged Thomas's perspective on the significance of his actions. She helped him see that his mistake wasn't just the affair, but the sustained act of deception that followed. Outside of therapy, navigating Harmony Creek was still difficult. Serafina was still around, a constant, unwelcome presence. I tried to avoid her, but in a town this small, it was impossible to never cross paths. Each encounter, even just seeing her across the street, sent a fresh wave of anxiety and hurt through me. The gossip hadn't died down. If anything, it had intensified. People were watching us, speculating. Mrs. Gable gave me sympathetic but pitying looks that felt worse than outright condemnation. Thomas noticed it too, the hushed whispers whenever we walked into a room together. It clearly bothered him, forcing him to confront the public consequences of his private actions. His parents were a different kind of challenge. They invited us over for Sunday dinner, a long-standing tradition. The tension was palpable. Martha, Thomas's mother, kept trying to steer the conversation to neutral topics, while subtly hinting that dwelling on the past wasn't healthy. "What's done is done, Eleanor," she said, patting my hand across the table. "Marriage is about looking forward, building a future, not getting stuck on old history." Arthur, Thomas's father, cleared his throat. "Your mother's right, Eleanor. Thomas made a mistake. He regrets it. But you have a good life here, a good marriage. It would be a shame to let youthful indiscretions ruin all that." Their words, meant to be comforting, felt dismissive. They saw the marriage as an institution to be preserved, a public image to be maintained, rather than a relationship built on genuine connection and trust. They echoed Thomas's initial hurtful perspective. "It's not just old history, Mother Vance," I said, my voice quiet but firm, surprising myself with my own assertiveness. "It's 10 years of living a lie. And that affects the future just as much as the past." Thomas squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support. He had heard me. He was starting to understand. He spoke up then, addressing his parents. "Eleanor's right. This isn't simple. It wasn't just a youthful indiscretion. It was a betrayal of trust. And we have to deal with that. It's not about appearances. It's about whether we can rebuild something real." His parents looked uncomfortable, clearly not wanting to delve into the messy emotional reality. The rest of the dinner was strained. Leaving their house, Thomas apologized for his parents' attitude. "They mean well," he said, "but they don't get it. They think marriage is just a status, a box to tick, not a living thing you have to nurture." "I know," I said, leaning my head against his arm. His apology felt genuine. He wasn't defending them. He was acknowledging their limitations and validating my feelings. It was a small step, but a significant one. The process was slow, agonizingly so. There were good days when the old comfort between us flickered back to life, moments of laughter or quiet connection that reminded me why I loved him. And there were bad days when the doubt and hurt felt overwhelming, when the sight of Serafina at the grocery store or an overheard whisper in the street sent me spiraling.